If you remember, before the class, we were actually studying that as a result of determine project budget process, what do we get at the output? We get three things. One was cost baseline. We have already covered it. Second was project funding requirements. That means periodic requirements and the total requirements. We are done with it. And then there are certain document updates or artifacts updates. One thing that is to be updated is cost estimate. Now, can someone tell me why cost estimates would be revised? Like we studied that we add up all the estimates at the end. We get the estimate of work packages, then we add up work packages and we'll get the estimate of control accounts, then we add up control accounts and then we get the estimate of project. So now we started our work from these estimates and now we are saying that during this process of addition, we'll revise the cost estimates. Why?
सर क्योंकि हमने जब रिकंसाइल किया और
Very good,
हमने
ma'am. Very good.
जी
Very good.
दोबारा एस्टिमेट करेंगे ना, अगर ओवर
दोबारा
बजट
है
है तो।
और अगर ओवर बजट है so we'll see that okay no this thing is not possible, let's find another way of doing it, so we'll try to reconcile that. Very good. Then why project schedule?
अगर
Obviously during
बिहाइंड
the
वाले ओवर स्केड्यूल यानी हेड स्केड्यूल।
like
ड्यूरेशन भी रीएस्टिमेट करेंगे
duration,
अकॉर्डिंग
like if we are reconciling things, we are moving activities to the next month or next week, obviously we have to reconcile it, so right, so project schedule. And then risk register, this thing, risk register, lesson and register, which is not written here, and the assumption log. These three documents are all like always there. I told you this thing in the last class that these three documents are always there in the input mostly, and at the output these are updated, right? Do you remember that?
जी सर आई डू रिमेंबर रिस्क रजिस्टर assumption log and the third was
Well, the third was lesson and register.
listen ठीक
है ना? So whether it is written or not, these are generally updated because during that process, there might be new risks that may emerge. And let's say during reconciliation, we found that, okay, now our duration would be increased and it would be very near to the deadline that we have from the customer. So obviously now this new risk would emerge. Previously, we planned our activities much earlier than the deadline, but now because of reconciliation we have to move things forward and now this new risk has emerged, so obviously we would like to register it in the risk register, right?
लेसन नॉन रजिस्टर हम क्यों अपडेट करेंगे
मैम अभी ये एग्जांपल दी ना मैंने कि
अगर न्यू रिस्क आ गए तो उसको अपडेट
during this
वो
process
भी रिकॉर्ड करें।
I've clicked something and I've gone back, let me go back there.
नहीं सर आप वैसे ही बता दें मतलब ये हमारे जो
Okay,
रिस्क नए आएंगे जी
हाँ देखें, जब आप प्रोजेक्ट बजट, यू आर डिफाइनिंग अ बजट एंड यू रिकंसाइल, पहले आपका ड्यूरेशन था 7 months, कस्टमर की तरफ से डेडलाइन है 9 months की. Now you have reconciled your activities and because of that, now your duration is almost 9 months.
तो सर
So
अभी
don't
हमने
you
शुरू किया
सुने ना
हमने भी शुरू
सुने ना नहीं but now there's a risk that you may get delayed. This deadline might be missed. This is a risk, correct?
जी
We would like to write it down somewhere because now there's a possibility, there's a high probability that we may miss the deadline.
ठीक है
So, and similar, many similar risks right here. So for example, आप ये कहते हो कि यार, because our activities have moved forward and because of that, let's say June, the month of June is falling somewhere here when we have to do procurements. So now there's a risk of increase in prices during the budget maybe. So
अच्छा सर जी
whatever risk you identify during this process in the finalization of cost baseline, obviously you are going to write it down somewhere and that you would write down in the risk register.
जी
Okay. Now, what inputs would you need to determine our budget? First thing is the the project management plan. This plan contains how many sub plans or subsidy plans?
12 प्लान
12. So we'll not require all of these plans. Rather, We'll use
We'll
only the cost management plan. Why cost management plan? Because this is the
Process.
plan that tells us that how you are going to estimate cost, how you are going to determine budget, how you are going to control cost. Do you remember that each plan, whether it is cost management plan or the schedule management plan or any plan, that plan tells that how different processes of that knowledge area would be performed. Correct?
जी sir.
Yes.
Do we have to prepare monthly budgets? Do we have to prepare quarterly budgets or what? So all that
जी
information will be given in the cost management plan. Then
जी
why resource management plan? You see, when you reconcile the resources like activities, let's say previously an activity was planned in the month of November and now that activity has been moved to December. So do you think that our resources would be available in December too? It might not be the case. So we need to see that what is the availability of resources on a particular day or month or day, maybe week, when we are rescheduling our task. Correct?
Yes.
हम्म
Okay. And why scope baseline? In the project management plan, we have 12 subsidy plans and 3 baseline, out of which we are using scope baseline. But why? Because
sir,
if you
What
remember,
included, what excluded.
yeah, this is the work that actually we have to do, and scope baseline contains scope statement. It contains WBS and WBS dictionary, and no, this is the WBS that we are going to use to add up our estimates, right?
Yes.
बिल्कुल.
Okay. So next, as uh, which documents or artifacts you have to use. First thing is basis of estimate. What do we mean by basis of estimate?
सर जब
When
भी हम estimate लगाते
huh,
हैं उसमें हम या तो ओपीएस देख रहे होते हैं, ईईएफ देख रहे होते हैं,
yeah,
या
koi
हम
bhi.
जो
Based
भी
assumptions on which we are
assumption
relying to calculate any estimate, right? So because of that, we have used certain estimate, but during budget, these assumptions might change.
जी
Okay, these assumptions might change. So now we need to see what assumptions were there to make this estimate. Just a minute, please. Sorry. Okay, then cost estimates. Obviously, these are the estimates that we have to add up. And why project schedule? Why project schedule?
सर क्योंकि स्केड्यूल के
What
बेसिस पे हमने एस्टिमेशन
A
की
sec.
है.
Okay, now I ask you one
कितना
question.
मार्जिन डिफाइन करते हैं
Well,
सारा.
you are very right, very right. It is time-phased budget, na? Scope baseline is time phased, sorry, cost baseline is time-phased. Obviously, it's project schedule. We have to map that. But I ask you one question. Do you remember that project management plan contained 12 plans and 3 baselines?
Yes.
जी सर.
What are these 3 baselines?
Scope baseline, cost baseline,
And
these आपका schedule baseline.
cost schedule baseline.
schedule baseline, right? So now this schedule is not written under the project management plan,
जी
right? So it should
बिल्कुल.
have been here in the schedule baseline, isn't it?
Yeah.
Why
Yes.
why
Yes.
why it
Yes.
is here? Why it is here? Now this thing is brings us to another concept, and that is there's a difference between 3 things. One is schedule model, right? Schedule model. Second is schedule baseline. Third is project schedule. These 3 things are very different, right?
पहला क्या है स्केड्यूल
Schedule model,
मॉडल
schedule baseline, and project schedule. Okay. Now, initially, when we list down activities, we prepare a model, that network diagram, which tells us that activity would be performed in this sequence according to this logic, right?
राइट.
Now this logic altogether, this is the model. Do you remember I told you what is model and modeling and simulation techniques, where we made a model to calculate your CGPA, we made a model to calculate a duration, right? Now,
जी sir.
according this initial logic is called as a schedule model. Then we enter different durations of the activity. That means we estimate activity durations and those durations are entered. And according to that, we get a duration
Schedule based.
schedule.
जी.
So now let's say we'll prepare a draft of it, first version of it. And then there are so many risks and there, management doesn't agree to this, stakeholders doesn't agree to this. Some resources are not available on a particular time. And then we'll readjust these things, right? We'll get various versions of the schedule model, and towards end we'll reach a place or time where everyone would be saying that okay, this is the model or this is the final state that we all agree to, and that model would be approved, and that approved version is called as schedule baseline. Is it clear?
Yeah.
जी sir.
Okay, now let's say these are the activities that are planned here. Let's say I'm only taking three activities, right? Just to keep things simple. Now, as per baseline, this activity has to start on 1st of January and finish on 15th of January, right? Is it clear?
Yes.
Then this activity has to, next activity has to start on 16th of January and finish by 31st of January, correct? And this activity has to start on 1st of Feb and finish on, let's say, 15th of Feb, correct?
ठीक है.
Now we have saved this thing as a baseline. This is what is approved. But when project starts, what happens? Let's say because of any reason, this activity is delayed to, and this is finished by 20th of January, correct?
ठीक है.
What would be its result? Because of this, all remaining activities would be
Will
rescheduled.
move- They
है
will
ना?
they will move forward.
So project schedule would be your current latest schedule at any given time.
Okay.
Based on your actual performance now, this activity is scheduled not on to start not on 16 January, rather it is scheduled to start on 20th of January now or 21st of January, correct? So according to the baseline, it should have started by 16th of January, but because of the delay in previous activities, its new schedule is now to start on 21st of January. Is it clear?
Yes.
So
Sir,
when we जी जी
सर ये तो अभी हम स्टिल प्लानिंग फेज पे है ना.
नहीं
तो
नहीं नहीं मैं
प्लानिंग फेज.
एग्जीक्यूशन नहीं 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 मैं आपको सिर्फ ये बता रहा हूँ, मैं आपको सिर्फ ये बता रहा हूँ कि एग्जीक्यूशन में जब हम जाते हैं तो एट दैट टाइम वी वी प्रेफर यूजिंग project schedule as the latest reference, right? Although we'll keep comparing this reference with sorry this our actual performance with the schedule baseline. However, to plan our activities, to plan our work, obviously we just can't rely on the schedule baseline all the time
राइट.
because things are not the same now. Many of activities have been pushed forward. So project schedule in the beginning, my project schedule and the schedule baseline were the same at this just at the start of the project. But because when we entered actual data into schedule baseline, things kept moving forward, or the schedule model, actual data on the schedule model, things started moving forward, right? So project schedule is a project document, but the schedule baseline is it is a part of project management plan. Since since we have to reschedule or keep rescheduling our activities, or we have to keep determining our budget even during the project. That's why we want that we look into project schedule rather than the schedule baseline. Now, please remember one thing, that planning is not done once only, right? During first phase, everything is fine, but during second, third round of planning, or when we'll revise our estimates, or when we'll again determine our new, budget, at that time, schedule baseline would not be very effective. At that stage, project schedule would be actually guiding us correctly, isn't it?
Yes, sir. We do that in reprogramming.
In reprogramming particularly, yes. In the beginning, project
मतलब
schedule
प्रोजेक्ट
and
स्केजुअल बेसलाइन ही बनेगा, स्केजुअल बेसलाइन 2 3, क्योंकि उसी को हम फिर लॉक करेंगे ना।
नहीं 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 नहीं, वो डिपेंड करता है, वो उस पे अभी आप ना जाए, ठीक है, उस पे ना जाए, वो ऐसा नहीं है, वो हम चेंज करेंगे, लेकिन schedule is actually the live condition of your project schedule. ठीक है,
Mm.
once we'll revise it and get it approved as a result of change request, only then that would become a new baseline.
ओके।
So this would keep happening during the course of, this was my first baseline. For example, I told you, let's say I said that, okay, you have to submit your assignment in the 7th week. This is my first baseline. Because of some reason you said, no sir, please push it forward. I made it eighth week, and because of that our quiz was moved to 10th week, and because of that everything kept moving forward. So initially the original course outline was your baseline, right? But we kept changing that baseline with the approval of, let's say, me or somebody else, right?
ओके।
Okay, now obviously I told you, why do we need a risk register, assumption log, and what else? The lesson learned register. These three documents would always be there at the start or input of every process. So because there might be some risks that may pertain to budgeting of the project, that may pertain to establishing cost baseline of the project. That's why first we need to see, are there any risk that may affect my budgeting process or not? Correct? Okay. Now, why do we need p- project business case at the input? Now, what is business case?
The business case जो है वो authorization document होता है ना,
No, 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 no.
जो
That is project. No, no,
basically
no, no, no. Look. When we prepare a project proposal, correct?
हम्म, हम्म,
After, then we carry out some feasibility as well.
जी,
And now business case tells you the actual purpose of the project. Why a
Sir,
project was
the
started.
motive नहीं होता, the motive of the project के
Motive, हाँ हाँ
motive
बिल्कुल,
क्या है,
purpose.
actual
Okay, okay,
reason.
okay. Purpose or reason, whatever you call it. Motive, purpose, reason. And this also includes your feasibility study. This also includes the alternatives that you had discussed and finally reached to a point. So that means why a project was started, and during that how which all alternatives you discussed, and then finally which alternative you logged into, and so on. Correct? So business case tells you everything. And then there is another document, we call it as benefit management plan. Benefit management plan tells you that what benefits are expected from this project, and at what point in time we are expecting, like let's say for after 1 year we are expecting this, after second year we are expecting this, third year, let's say polio would be almost eliminated or something. So these are the expected benefits at a particular time, and then how those benefits would be materialized. This all is written in the benefit management plan. Is it clear?
हम्म,
Combined together, these both of these documents are known as business documents. So why do we need to consult these documents for preparation of a budget? Look, in many cases, let's say, now I'm giving you just one example. There could be many scenarios that you can think of. Let's say same Barrier University hostel, okay, and this project was awarded to some builder or constructor in 10 million, and that builder, you know started this project and asked the project manager to finish this project in 7 million. This was written in the charter, but when this charter is done here in the initiating, but when the project manager started planning and got more requirements from Berry University, according to those requirements, this project manager prepared a scope statement and then a WBS and then activities and so on. Based on that, when project managers try to prepare the project funding requirements, project budget, or for that matter, let's say the cost baseline, he or she realized that this project cannot be completed in less than 9.5 million, right? Now, in this particular case, we would require that why management took this decision. I don't know. I don't understand why management has taken a project for which it has contracted, 10 million, or only they are saving only 0.5 million for this huge effort. Why? So this document will tell us maybe they just want to get a entry into this market at a very low profit, no matter even if they get a low profit, right? So it would be your business document, this organization's business document that would tell them that why they have initiated this project if such a low profit is expected.
सर उसके बाद
Similar.
फिर हम ये भी तो
Hmm.
देखेंगे ना कि हॉस्टल में जो लोग इसको ऑक्यूपाई करेंगे वो भी
Mhm.
तो फिर एक
No, no,
बेनिफिट ही
no.
होना है.
Look, that is Bahria University's project. I'm talking about from the perspective of this builder. For this builder, there's only one thing, that is they are receiving, this builder or construction organization company, they are receiving 10 million from Bahria University to build this hostel. That's it. Correct? For them, the only purpose is profit. If but where it would be written that our sole purpose is profit, and it is not going into contract with Bahria just to build your profile for future, investments. If that is the case, this organization, construction organization, may be happy with even 9.5 million. Correct? But from where
लेकिन
this information would come to project manager?
द बिजनेस
Obviously
मैनेजर.
from business case, right? From business case. Correct?
यस सर.
So these business documents should also be consulted. Then agreements. We just talk about agreements. Like let's say Barry University, what are the contracts? Let's say this is Barry University and they have gone into contract with 10 million. And now during planning, they realize that this project cannot be completed. Let's say this project manager tells that this project would be completed in 11 million. It cannot be completed in 10 million. You have quoted a wrong price or you have quoted at a very lower budget or something. So now this organization might consider to cancel the contract or agreement, right? And for that, they need to consult the clauses of that agreement, correct?
राइट.
Okay, so there are many other aspects. Now, here I would just like to tell you one thing. What is the difference between agreement and contract? Can someone tell me?
जी सर, एग्रीमेंट्स जो होते हैं वो इनिशियल लेवल पर होते हैं, और जब आप उसको एक ऑफिशियल डॉक्यूमेंट की फॉर्म में लेते हैं तो वो कॉन्ट्रैक्ट्स होते हैं.
Okay, agreement is any understanding or uh, an agreement on the
Sir,
intent. This
agreement, the contract
okay.
legal value.
सर म्यूट रखें, बैकग्राउंड नॉइज ज्यादा आ रहा है. ओके. Look,
है ना बहुत ज्यादा.
okay, agreement is any understanding between two parties. For example, if you and I agreed to that we'll have a break after 15 minutes, this is an agreement. If let's say our deputy director, alumni affairs, tells that, or he or I agree to that we'll arrange a meeting, whether through a memo, whether verbally, whether through a legal document. These all are agreement, right? Everything is agreement. Whenever two parties agree to something, but some of these agreements take a shape of a legal document, and that is a contract, right? So every contract is also an agreement, but every agreement is not necessarily a contract. Correct?
जी
Okay.
सर.
Right. What EF enterprise environment factors you would can influence the determined budget process? The main thing is exchange rates, for example, like whatever the current condition is. Let's say we one of my friends, he went into some international contracts, right? He provides some IT services. And he was, getting mad. We met few days back, and he was saying that, look, I have quoted all the estimates and budgets based on I guess 175 178 rupees जो dollar के
Mhm.
exchange rate उस पे, and now all his estimates have gone invalid. So obviously these factors would be considered while preparing budget, right?
Mhm.
Similarly, OPS include policies and procedures. So there might be some budgeting related policies and procedures in the organization, and you have to prepare your budget according to those policies and guidelines. Similarly, OPS also include historical information and lesson learned. So we'll also keep all the previous budgets of similar projects, past projects, as well as the lesson learned by previous project managers while preparing budgets. So we'll try to apply those lessons learned here. Then cost budgeting tools. Is my organization using any software, Excel sheets or something, or
Mhm.
any other software, for preparing budget? If yes, we'll use those. And similarly, is there any reporting methods from whom we need to get approval of the budgets from whom? Like in many organization, they define that if your budget is more than, let's say, 10 million, you have to seek so and so approval from so and so person. But if it is less than 10 million, then you can get this approval from another person, another authority. So that means these OPs can affect your budgeting process, or if not, then at least the approval of that budget, right? Is it clear? So which techniques do we use, or methods, models? Like, do you remember I told you ITTOs thing? The ITTOs, we have covered the inputs. Initially, we covered the outputs, then we covered the inputs. Now, which tools and techniques do we use to determine the process? So one thing
Expert
is very
judgment.
clear. Expert judgment would always be there. Whatever
Mhm.
process you perform, you need to have an expertise of that. If not, as a project manager, you don't have those expertise. There would be people in your team who would be assisting you in this. If they don't have, nobody is there in the project team, there would be some other departments, they would be assisting you, like finance department or some other manager who would help you in this. And even if not that, then you have to check someone from outside the organization, and it could be your some friend in your network or professional network, or it could be some consultant that you may hire for this purpose, right? But expertise has to be there, either within you, from your team, or somebody in your organization. But expertise of what? Previous similar projects of that industry or discipline, like IT projects, construction projects. Everybody has a different, you know, aspects for budgeting. Similarly, financial principles. How do we
मैग्नीट्यूड ऑफ
prepare budgets?
प्रोजेक्ट डिपेंड करता है
Magnitude of
ऑफ द प्रोजेक्ट
budget.
मतलब
हाँ,
बड़ा
project, बिल्कुल, बिल्कुल, very right, very right. Funding requirements and sources of funding, that would also, like, if somebody is not aware of from where he or she can get or generate funds for the project, like if somebody is not known to the banking system or any financial institutions, that organization or that person is not aware of these things, he or she might be limited to a budget that is very narrow. But if he knows or she knows about various sources of funding, how to generate funds, obviously his budgeting or her budgeting methods would be different, right? So there has to be these expertise with you. Then cost aggregation means you need to understand, or you need to know how to add cost. Simple as that. Like how to add cost with, like I told you, that contingency reserves can be added within estimate of an activity, or these can be added at the top. So you need to know this process, right? Okay. Then data analysis. Do you remember I told you that reserve analysis and management of reserve is very important aspect, and this would continue. Like you need to know that how many reserves do you need, contingency reserves or management reserves that you need to add in cost baseline or project budget, right? So how many funds are required? But please remember one thing: during planning, Reserve analysis will tell us that how many reserves do we need. But during execution, we say that, okay, how many reserves we needed in the beginning, how much of those reserves we have already utilized, and how much reserves we expect more during the rest of the project, and do we need to acquire or request for any additional reserves, correct? So in the planning, we only analyze that how many management reserves and contingency reserve would be needed. Is it clear? But during the course of the project, we would also see that how many reserves we have already consumed and how much more reserves do we need.
Mm.
Fine. Okay. Then historical information review. Why do we need historical information? Look, let's say after all my budget preparation, I found that the house that I'm going to build requires 130,000 rupees. Oh, sorry, 130, 100, let's say 13 million. Now, I would see that, okay, previously, here, one of my friends or another project manager in the organization, they builded a very similar project, constructed a very similar project just 2 months back in, let's say, 9 million. Why my cost is coming so high? You need to compare this thing, correct? Okay. Yeah, I will calculate, okay, what per square cost is coming with me and what was the per square cost of a project that has recently been completed. So I would like to know that, okay, what are the differences? Why I'm costing so high? If that is the case, you may need to go back to your estimate cost process, that there might be something wrong in the estimation, correct?
Right.
Okay, and historical information. We have already covered about these models earlier. Now, what is funding limit reconciliation?
सर फंडिंग लिमिट फंडिंग रिकंसिलिएशन तो मुझे पता था जो अभी आपने पढ़ाया था
Yeah, वो
कैपिटल
yeah, वो yeah. Yeah, that is actually funding limit reconciliation.
लिमिट हमें जो है वो
We
किस
need to
लिमिट
reconcile, exactly. We need to reconcile expenditure of funds according to the any limitations that have been imposed. And a variance between funding limits and the planned expenditure will sometimes necessitate the rescheduling of the work. I told you earlier, right? This point we have already covered. So this is accomplished by imposed date constraint for the work. You just move forward certain activities. As a result, generally duration is increased. Now, financing. You might need to know, okay, these are the funds that we require during a particular period, and what would be my sources of financing for that, from where I'm going to get those financiers. Then it is a common for long-term infrastructure, industry, or public service project to seek external sources of funds. You just don't sorry, manage all funds by yourselves. You acquire funds from various you know f- uh, financial institutions, right? Banks or other institutions. Now, if a project is
Assalamualaikum.
funded
Sorry to interrupt.
extended, sorry, if a project is funded
Assalamualaikum, sir.
externally, Walaikum salam. What's this?
सर अटेंडेंस अभी हो जाएगी
Sorry?
सर अटेंडेंस अभी हो जाएगी
हो जाएगी जिसमें जाना चाहिए, अभी 5 मिनट है वैसे. Now,
चलो
the funding entity may have certain requirements that are required to be met. Okay, now this is important. If you are acquiring funds from someone else, some other institute, they may impose certain limitations on that. Like if someone of you are doing some donor funded projects, you must be aware of that how many restrictions or checks they impose on you, and you have to produce lot many reports to satisfy them, right? So in that case too, will that is also another factor that we'll consider. So with this, we have covered the determined budget process. Now we are left with only one process, that is control cost. But I'm telling you that for that, I'll share some lectures within this week, and you have to watch those recordings before coming to next class, please. Otherwise, it would be that lecture could be very heavy for you to absorb, right? Is that clear? So please do watch those recordings before coming to next class, and we'll have our last quiz in the coming class too. Correct? Everything that we have studied up till now, like I guess we have cost estimates. I'll tell you the syllabus through a text message. So this determined budget process, for this process, we need to know the cost management plan, the resource management plan, and the scope baseline. Then we also consulted the basis of estimate, cost estimate, project schedule, risk register, and then some business documents here. And finally, we considered EF and OPS. And then we applied our expert judgment, cost aggregation method, reserve analysis, historical information review, funding limit reconciliation, and financing techniques on that. And finally, we got a cost baseline, project funding requirements, the periodic requirements, and the total requirements, as well as some document updates. Is it clear?
जी सर सर क्लियर है सर वो
जी
एक रिक्वेस्ट थी
जी जी मैम.
सर वो क्विज नेक्स्ट वीकेंड पे ही लेंगे सर आप
Yeah, that is the last class, and we cannot just postpone it.
सर आप मैं क्योंकि सर होंगी नहीं तो क्या मैं मंडे को दे सकती हूँ ये टेस्ट
ओके ओके उसके लिए कुछ नहीं मंडे को नहीं नहीं नो नो सॉरी सॉरी आई हैव टू सबमिट द मार्क्स बाय 4th दैट इज मंडे नहीं you have to do it earlier on Sunday. Will that be possible, or you can give it earlier?
सर आई कैन गिव इट अर्लियर लेकिन वो आप कह रहे थे कि मतलब अभी आज